Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
The Battle of Westport is considered by some to be the Gettysburg of the West, which was fought October 23rd, 1864. Westport, which is now a part of Kansas City, Missouri, had already established its place in history by the time Union and Confederate forces clashed there in 1864. John Calvin McCoy, known as the father of Kansas City, had laid out the town, and pioneers traveling along the Oregon, California, and Santa Fe trails all passed through it on their way west. Oh, nice. Westport gradually replaced nearby Independence as the as the jumping off point for the westward trails, contributing to the growth of the town.
Why wouldn't they?
I remember, Oregon Trail game, you had to start in Independence.
Yep. Or was it?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. They got a new one out.
Yes, I have it.
I was going to get it, but
It's decent. Actually, I beat it. First time and one of the few times I've ever made it successfully. Made it with one guy, but I did it.
Yeah, that's why it ain't.
You can kick people off and shit, though.
It ain't as hard as the.
Well, they have the classic version and then an updated version.
Did you beat the classic version?
No, I beat the updated version. But you can if people get too fucking stupid for you, you can kick them off and get out of here. Or if they'll try to come back later and you can accept them or fucking make them go on their own way and shit. It's hilarious.
All right. They let you go out hunting like they did before?
Of course.
Nice. Is it still 2D?
No. Well, kind of 2D, but better.
Oh, all right.
A little bit.
2D with the 3D?
2.5D.
All right. The town of Kansas, also known today as Kansas City, during the Civil War served as headquarters for the Federal District of the Border and was garrisoned by a sizable contingent of the Union troops. While its own municipal star was beginning to fade in favor of its northern neighbor, Westport was still of some importance in the region. As it turned out, however, the decision to fight here would be the result of a chain of events that had little to do with any strategic importance attached to the town itself. I think this one or the last one? Where were we at last week? Was it still Price is Right or those other guys?
Yep, Price.
Yeah, nothing was ever meant to be what it was supposed to be. That last battle wasn't never supposed to be what it was, and it did. What one was that? It was Little Blue River, I believe it was. One of those ones. Byram's Ford, maybe.
Well, because they're chasing the Confederates.
And shit's happening that they don't want to happen, and it makes no sense, or it didn't help or not help the war anyway.
Well, the whole thing of Sterling Price is, we'll get into it, but obviously the whole thing of him is to take pressure off the East. Didn't work.
No.
September 1864, Sterling Price led his army of Missouri into Missouri with the hope of capturing the state for the South and turning the northern people against Abe Lincoln with the upcoming presidential election. Major General William Rosecrans, commanding the Federal Department of the Missouri, began assembling troops to repel the invasion. Rosecrans' cavalry under Major General Alfred Pleasanton set out in pursuit of Price's force, accompanied by a large detachment of infantry from the Army of Tennessee under Andrew J. Smith.
Well, after his defeat at the Battle of Fort Davidson, Price, he realized that St. Louis, way too far heavily fortified for his rather small force of 12,000 men. So he was like, guess what? We're going west. We're going to go threaten Jefferson City. They're a little bit smaller. After light skirmishing there, Price again decided that his target was also too heavily fortified, and he moved further west toward Fort Leavenworth.
He got faulty information, and It wasn't as fortified as he thought. He could have taken it, probably.
Yep, exactly what it was, as we've seen so many times. And usually it was on the Union side making that call. They got the whole rebel army over there. Right. No, it was just a garrison of about 700 men.
There was 3 people.
All right. So he marched on. Disease and desertion coupled with battlefield losses whittled Price's force down to about 8,500 men after he was making failed attempt after failed attempt after failed attempt.
Major General Samuel Curtis, commander of the Federal Department of Kansas, now faced the threat of Price's army moving into his department after learning of Confederate movements from spies, which included Wild Bill Hickok on these.
Look at that shit, supposedly.
Curtis accordingly assembled his troops into a force that he named the Army of the Border. James G. Blunt, beautiful, was recalled from Indian campaigns to lead its 1st Division, composed mostly of volunteer regiments and some Kansas militia. Curtis was only initially able to muster about 4,000 volunteers, and then he asked Kansas Governor Thomas Kearny to call out the state militia to bolster his forces.
All right.
He's like, come on, Carney.
Well, Governor Carney was like, I kind of suspect that Curtis, he's attempting to draw the militia away from their voting districts as election time was nearing.
They only fuck politics, dude.
Right.
Seriously.
That's all it was. This war, like I said, this war should have been over in 1862.
Ridiculous.
Carney was unconcerned with Price's force
Ferrari away.
Carney was unconcerned with Price's force far away in Missouri, and he felt it posed no threat to Kansas whatsoever, which it didn't. However, once Price had turned west toward Jefferson City, Carney relented, and Major General George Deitzler, he took command of a division, it was the Kansas militia, that now joined Curtis's Army of the Border. Carney was overreacting.
Carney was acting like a carney.
Right.
By order of Major General Blunt, under General Field Orders No. 2, the militia regiments of William H.M. Fishbeck, Brigadier General of Militia, were placed under the command of Charles W. Blair, who was Colonel of the Volunteers. Fishbeck was infuriated that his command had been subordinated to a volunteer officer. Since Kansas law stated that militia should be kept under the command of militia officers, Fishbeck disregarded Blunt's order.
Oh, wow.
Blunt had Fishbeck arrested and held until he was released by order of Major General Curtis. Upon release, Fishbeck resumed command of the Kansas militia regiments with orders to obey directives that came from Major General Blunt, though. He said, you'll get out, but Blunt's your guy, man.
Well, they've probably seen this. He was like, he has a point here. But
I mean, it is state law.
So, I mean, it wasn't the Union Army. It was the militia.
Right.
Well, this arrangement had Brigadier General Fishbeck in direct command of the militia units attached to the 3rd Brigade, 1st Division, and Colonel Charles Blair in overall command of the brigade itself.
But didn't really control anything the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Division did.
Right. Historians have described the arrangement as a brigade within a brigade.
Right. Why didn't they just make them separate?
Right. Blair and Fishbeck, they led the militia into action at Westport, which was accompanied on the field by Major General George Deitzler as well. They then, in the subsequent pursuit of Price, Major General Curtis ordered the militia to return home.
Good for them.
Well, I guess he really didn't need them.
General Curtis sent the bulk of his 1st Division under General James Blunt to confront the Confederates at Lexington, approximately 40 miles east of Kansas City, October 19th. Blunt was unable to stop Price, but did slow his progress and gathered information on the Confederate forces. Again, at the Little Blue River, October 21st, Blunt was forced to retire, but not without slowing Price enough for a pursuing Federal Cavalry Division, which was under Alfred Pleasonton, to close the gap between himself and the rebels.
Right.
Well, slow him down until you can get to him, I guess.
Here we go. Additional fighting occurred the next day at Independence. Price emerging victorious yet again. Curtis was nearly 60 years old at this time, and age has taken a toll on his desire for combat.
He's like, I'm fucking too old for this shit.
60 years old back then, shit. However, thanks to his aggressive subordinate, General Blunt, Curtis decided to make another stand south of Westport. Blunt, he personally oversaw the construction of a defensive line south of town along Brush Creek. This was perpendicular to the Kansas state line. Okay, here we go.
Price was aware of the forces to his front and rear, which together outnumbered him nearly 3-1. So he determined to deal with them one at a time. He decided to attack Curtis's army first at Westport. Almost as old as his adversary, Price left direction of his engagement to his subordinate General Joe Shelby. With about 500 wagons and 5,000 head of cattle, Price first needed a ford for supply trains across the Blue River near Westport. One of Price's divisions under John Marmaduke accordingly forced a crossing at Byram's Ford, the 22nd, then took up positions on the west bank to hold off Pleasanton's Federal cavalry, which by now threatened Price's rear.
Uh-oh.
2 other Confederate divisions under Shelby and James Fagan were poised to assault Blunt along Brush Creek the next day, hoping to defeat him before Pleasanton could arrive on the field in force. Sorry, guys.
Wow. Well, Blunt, anticipating Price's impending attack, he had positioned his 3 available brigades along the Brush Creek, while a 4th under Colonel Charles Blair was en route from Kansas City, east of Warrenall Lane, which is present-day Warrenall Road. Oh, that's cool. Was the brigade of J. Hobart Ford. West of Warrenall was the brigade of Charles Doc Jennison, with an artillery battery in support. 2 regiments of cavalry filled the gap to the west between Jennison and the Kansas-Missouri state line. As a right angle to Jennison was the brigade of Thomas Moonlight, running parallel to that state line. Moonlight, he was positioned to either support Jennison or move against Confederate flank. Oh, look at that shit, dude. Price is fucked.
Yep, daybreak 23rd. Blunt opened the battle by sending Jennison and Ford over an icy bush. and whoosh, over an icy brush creek with their skirmishers.
Nice.
Advancing up a ridge, the Union forces engaged the Confederates in an open field to the south. The rebel divisions of Joseph Shelby and James Fagan had meanwhile received orders from Price to hold Curtis in front of Westport. Shelby counterattacked with his Iron Brigade under M. Jeff Thompson in the lead.
Uh-oh. Here we go. The attack drove the outflanked Federales back across the creek. Oh. Moonlight's brigade hit so hard that it was forced to fall back to the high ground on Brush Creek's west bluff into what is now Westwood, Kansas, while Jennison's brigade retreated almost to the streets of Westport. It has appeared that at this point the old rebels might carry the day.
Same thing happened at Cedar Creek, I believe.
Sure it was, but guess what, boys? It was not to be. Shelby's force was out of ammo and remained on the heights south of Brush Creek.
Also at this crucial hour, Colonel Blair's brigade arrived and Curtis heard Pleasanton's gun engaging the Confederates at nearby Byram's Ford.
Yes.
His spirits lifted. The Union commander rode to the front lines and personally directed Blair's troops into the battle west of Jenison. The reinforced Federals charged across the creek once more with Blair in the lead, but were again repulsed and retreated to the north bank.
Oh, shit.
All right.
Damn. Well, I gotta give it to the old Rebs, man.
Yes.
Needed another option besides frontal assaults. Curtis, he decided to search for a weak point. He was like, maybe there's a weak point over there. You gotta find
That's
it.
the thing with these unions, man. They're never good at frontal assaults, literally.
No. So he's looking for a weak point in the old rebel line. His scouts found a local farmer named George Thoman, who was eager to help the old Federals, as the Confederates had stole his horse the previous night. Thoman, he showed Curtis a gulch cut by Swan Creek, running up to rise along Shelby's left flank. Uh-oh. Curtis, he personally directed his headquarters escort and the 9th Wisconsin Battery through this gully. He's like, here we go. This is it, boys.
Meanwhile, Blunt continued to push Jenison and Ford up the rise across Brush Creek, making slow progress until the 9th Wisconsin opened fire upon the Confederate flank and rear. Encouraged, Blunt's men now poured over the ridge, but Shelby's men fought back stubbornly, and a seesaw battle ensued in the open prairie, back and forth. The Union Army gradually gained the upper hand, slowly pushing Shelby's brigades back to the Warnell House.
Uh-oh, here we go. As disaster was befalling Shelby and Fagan, a similar fate was happening to Price's rear
It's all
guard.
falling down.
And this was under Marmaduke at Byram's Ford. A division of Price's army under General Shelby had forced a crossing at the ford on the 22nd, which is the day prior. This forced the old Bluecoats defenders there to retire to Westport. Shelby's colleague, General Marmaduke, he established his own defensive line on the west bank of the river. He did that to hold off Pleasanton's cavalry, which was pressing them hard from the east. If Pleasanton could now force his way across the Blue River, he would be in position to threaten Price's army, as well as his supplies. Uh-oh.
Marmaduke's division was attacked by 3 of Pleasanton's brigades starting at 8 o'clock in the morning of the 23rd. The Confederates initially managed to hold their own.
Oh.
One of the Union brigade commanders, Brigadier General Egbert B. Brown, stalled its attack and was placed under arrest by Pleasanton for disobeying orders.
That's right.
Another of Pleasanton's brigade commanders, Colonel Edward Winslow, was wounded and succeeded by Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Benteen, who would later ride to fame at Little Bighorn.
Oh, shit.
Despite these setbacks, Federal troopers gained the West Bank by 11 a.m. and Marmaduke retired.
Look at that. Knew that was happening. As Brown's brigade, now led by John F. Phillips, forded the river. They came under heavy fire from Marmaduke's artillery. Once they crossed that river, they charged Marmaduke across an open field. During this charge, Union troops from Missouri and Arkansas, they battled Rebs from these same 2 states. Marmaduke forced back, rejoining Shelby and Fagan. Blunt, he pounded the shit out of the now consolidated Confederate remnants with his own cannon.
Jeez. While the main Confederate army was now being hit hard on 2 sides, Pleasanton's 4th Brigade under Brigadier General John McNeil moved against the rebel brigade, which was under William Lewis Cabell, guarding a second ford near Hickman Mills. McNeil's brigade was able to drive the Confederates from the ford and across the river.
Hey.
Federal columns were now converging on Price from 3 different directions.
Holy shit.
Price, it's all over, bud. Just go.
The old Rebs pulled back to their last line of defense along the road south of Forest Hill, present-day Gregory Boulevard. They did that with Colonel Jenison leading the pursuit for the old Union. By now, 30 Union guns had been brought to bear against the lone remaining Confederate cannon.
Oh, jeez.
One Federal battery had just unlimbered when Colonel James McGee's Arkansas cavalry charged down Warnall's Lane in an attempt to capture it. Captain Curtis Johnson of the 15th Kansas Cavalry saw the old rebel attack forming and immediately moved to intercept. Johnson and McGee personally engaged each other with their revolvers.
Oh, these motherfuckers.
Both commanders badly wounded, but they both survived. The fight continued to rage until the old Blue Coach reinforcements secured the battery once again.
Jeez, when was the last time you seen two leaders of the regiments or whatever fighting each other?
Don't happen very often.
That's how that should have been ended.
The battle?
Grant and Lee duking it out in a fist fight.
Well, Grant beat the shit out of Lee.
You don't know that. Lee was a stubborn old
Right.
general, man.
Grant was probably drunk.
Shelby sent a brigade under Colonel Sidney Jackman to secure his wagon trains, but these had already been removed by order of General Price. Jackman was instead intercepted by General Fagan, who alerted him to the mass cavalry of Union, which just had crossed the Big Blue River to the east. Seeing Pleasanton's close proximity to the Confederate flank and rear, General Curtis had ordered a general advance of the entire Union line, with Blair's and Jennison's brigade leading the charge.
Okay.
Shelby, meanwhile, had only Thompson's Iron Brigade to hold off this massive assault.
Uh-oh.
When one of Pleasanton's batteries arrived in support of Curtis's men, Thompson's Confederates finally broke and fled. They said, "Fuck you.
We're out." So this is enough.
No need for this."
This is enough. Price's men set fire to prairie grass in the area to create a smoke screen to cover their withdrawal.
Good for you guys.
Witnesses, they reported that the road was strewn with debris from the fleeing rebel army. Next day, Blunt and Pleasanton took up their pursuit of Price's remaining forces. They would chase Price through Kansas and southern Missouri, engaging him at Marais de Cygne, Mine Creek, the Marmaton River as well, and then finally at Newtonia, forcing Price to withdraw into Indian Territory. Ooh-wee! From which he eventually returned to Arkansas via Texas, and ultimately leaving the old rebel leader with less than 6,000 survivors from his initial force of 12,000, half his men. And his campaign officially ended on November 1st, 1864.
Jeez,
He got out early.
Like we said earlier, the Battle of Westport, one of the largest battles west of the Mississippi, over 30,000 troops involved. Union victory put an end to Price's campaign for Missouri, and the battle has accordingly been referred to as the Gettysburg of the West. Curtis wrote to Henry Halleck after the battle that the victory at Westport was most decisive. This greatly contested border state was now firmly under Union control and would remain so forever.
Yeah.
For forever.
Until 2025. According to a recent book on Price's campaign, Cal S. Sinese's The Last Hurrah, Sterling Price's Missouri Expedition of 1864.
How come we didn't hear about this guy in the beginning of this show, and now he's everywhere last few episodes?
Historians have long exaggerated the casualties inflicted in the fighting around Westport on the 21st to the 23rd of October. Supposedly.
And this guy's always the one that's like, no, this shit's not even right. This is what really happened.
Right. Well, Kyle, he says, no, that the Union forces lost 361 and the Confederates lost 510 killed, wounded, or captured on the 23rd. However, most sources give the total casualties as 3,000 men, about 1,500 Union, 1,500 Confederate, which is probably more accurate. Another primary source gives an estimate of 400 casualties for the Union and 1,000 to 1,500 for the Confederate.
Okay. Well, there's people died. All right, some people died.
Right. Some people did things.
Several participants in the battle later went on to gain national fame in other ways, many of them in the American Old West. Buffalo Bill Cody served as a private in the 7th Kansas Cavalry.
Sure did.
Which is part of Jennison's Jayhawkers. Wild Bill Hickok, we already know he served as a scout for General Curtis. Frederick Benteen, who assumed command of a brigade at Byram's Ford, would subsequently fight with George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Ooh, he got out, though.
Right. Mountain Man John Liver Eaton Johnson, on whose life the movie Jeremiah Johnson was made.
No shit.
He enlisted in the U.S. Navy before the war, and on February 24th, 1864, joined Company A, 3rd Regiment Colorado Cavalry Volunteers from Depot in St. Louis.
Okay.
With that regiment, he fought for the Union in the Battle of Westport.
Fantastic.
I don't know who John Liver Eaton Johnson is.
No, I don't, but Jeremiah Johnson.
He's a mountain man, I guess.
Right. No shit. Wow. 3 Union officers at Westport later served as post-war state governors. You got Samuel J. Crawford, governor of Kansas. John Laurie Beveridge became governor of Illinois, and Thomas Theodore Crittenden, he became governor of Missouri and was later buried in Forest Hill Cemetery. Scene of the fighting during Price's retreat from Westport. Nice. That's where that's at. Nice. Serving in the Kansas militia during the battle was Kansas State Treasurer David Heffelbauer. No shit. Treasurer, huh? Good for him. He helped found People's Party in Kansas and was a leader in the Greenback and later Union Labor Party. So this guy. Senators Jim Lane and Samuel C. Pomeroy. They served on Curtis's staff, while future United States Senator Preston Plum and Edmund Ross, they served as federal officers. Well, that's cool. Look at that. I mean, of course you're going to have...
Right. Former Lieutenant Governors Thomas C. Reynolds joined General Price's staff in hopes that Price's army might capture Jefferson City and install him as the governor of a Confederate regime in Missouri. Price had served as pre-war governor, while Marmaduke later served as post-war governor of Missouri. How the fuck?
Dude, people don't realize this war was just 50 years after War of 1812.
Right.
And with a bunch of nobodies still running the country. Bunch of youngins.
50 years before World War I. What's your point?
It's true. Damn, America's in a lot of wars.
Yeah, I mean, they've never been a year that there hasn't been.
Wow. Although many signs and plaques commemorate some aspect of the Battle of Westport are still present throughout Kansas City today. The main battle, maybe not today, we don't know.
Right.
The main battle monument is located in the Sunset Hill neighborhood, just south of the Country Club Plaza. So if you guys want to check that out, if you're in that little area of Westport, go to Sunset Hill neighborhood, Country Club Plaza. Because the center of the main battlefield comprises present-day Luce Park and a portion of the upper Warrenell campus of the Pembroke High School. Oh, that's cool. The memorial is at the southern end.
Pembroke Hill School.
Right. Oh. Same thing, right?
Probably not. Sounds like a college.
Right. The memorial is at the southern end of Luce Park along West 55th Street. So there you go, guys.
Okay. Battle of Westport Museum and Visitor Center, located in Swope Park, depicts the experiences of the soldiers and civilians during the 3 days battle. A Battle of Westport drive-in tour starts at Westport at Kelly's Westport Inn, which is the oldest standing building in Kansas City, Missouri. Oh, nice. It consists of a series of placards, one at each stop, giving both a detailed history of what occurred there and directions to the next stop.
Okay.
Stops along the self-guided tour include the Warrenell House, which served as hospital during the battle, and the Forest Hill Cemetery, which we know. Joseph Shelby was also buried there.
No.
Many men of his Iron Brigade as well.
No.
The Trailside Center Museum in Kansas City has several exhibits and research material related to the battle as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Looks like a good little stop there. Check that out. The first step toward memorializing the Battle of Westport, it came early in the 20th century, 1906. Local historian Paul Jenkins, he published his Battle of Westport, while Byram's Ford engagement was reenacted in Swope Park in 1912. During 1920, civil leaders under H.H. Crittenden of the Missouri Valley Historical Society.
H.H. Crittenden, is that any relation to Thomas Crittenden?
Right. They conceived a plan to save the Westport battles sites near present-day Luce Park and Byram's Ford. Crittenden's father was Colonel Thomas Crittenden.
Could have just waited.
Who led one of the Union cavalry brigades at Byram's Ford battle, and later served as governor of Missouri.
He's there dead. The mayor and council of Kansas City passed ordinances recognizing these sites. This was followed by the introduction of a bill in 1924 in the U.S. Congress to create a national military park. This endeavor proved unsuccessful, and memorial efforts ceased for several years. During the 50s, much of the battlefield was disturbed by commercial and industrial construction, though the developer of one industrial complex did erect a memorial, near the historic route of Byram's Ford Road.
All right.
Jeez.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do? On the eve of the Civil War centennial in 1958, for some reason, the Civil War Roundtable of Kansas City, it was formed with former President Harry S. Truman. He was a charter member.
Good for you, buddy.
Dr. Howard Monet, a member of his roundtable, he researched, spoke, and wrote extensively about what he termed the action before Westport. His book of that title was published in 1964 for the battle's centennial. Dr. Monet, his enthusiasm led to the eventual creation of an automobile tour of the widely dispersed battle sites. Oh, that's cool. Is it still around today?
All right.
Probably not.
All right.